So this article's been making the rounds today on all the mainstream garbage news networks. Florida is now America's inflation hotspot. Oh! But what's even better is that people are blaming this on Ron DeSantis. The amount of gymnastics people are willing to do in order to make DeSantis look bad in favor of Trump is mind-blowing. You gotta love how the mainstream media is fake unless it has an article that serves your ideals or whatever it is that you're trying to push. You gotta love that. But beside the fact that they're using this to push down on DeSantis somehow, I don't even see how that's related. The whole premise of this is financially illiterate. First of all, revising what words mean, especially what they historically meant, is a strategy that people use to deceive. And inflation is no different. This definition from Merriam-Webster is one of the only modern definitions that's close to accurate. Right here, a continuing rise in the general price level, usually attributed to an increase in the volume of money and credit relative to available goods and services. The usually is the new part, the deception part. Because if you study basic economics and care about what words actually mean, and you look at older definitions of inflation, like for example these shown in 1997, less than 30 years ago, you'll see and you would understand that inflation is a raise in prices due to an increase in the money supply. For example, check out these quotes from the early 1900s. You can see inflation exists whenever the supply of money circulating in bank deposits increases relative to the demand for media of exchange in such a way as to bring about a rise in the general price level. Basically what this means is that if you increase the supply of circulating money without increasing the goods or services that are being produced, you're increasing the amount of cash that flows around, thus creating more demand for them, and the prices raise. That's the rule of supply and demand. Just think about it in simple terms. If they wrote a check to everyone in the United States of America for $1 million, do you think that the price of a car would go up? The price of food would go up? The price of a house would go up? Of course it would, because we wouldn't be producing any additional cars. We wouldn't be producing any additional houses. Everybody would just have an additional $1 million. And all of a sudden, that car that you wanted to buy, you'd now be able to afford it because you have $1 million. So the demand for those cars would go up without the supply increasing. So the price would raise commensurate to the increased demand and the increase in the money supply. That's the simplest way to explain what inflation is. So considering that only the federal government and the Federal Reserve Bank can issue and print new money, increase the money supply, how could an individual state or an individual location be responsible for inflation? Here's a hint. It can't. So what they're saying by an inflation hotspot is that there's an increase of prices in Florida. An increase of prices based on basic economics means an increase in demand. And all the mainstream outlets are reiterating this exact same point. Here's another one, the gems at CNN. But look, they even say it if you just pay attention. Florida is America's inflation hotspot because of a persistent problem with sky-high housing costs. That's not inflation. They're just talking about increases in prices, specifically increases in prices for housing, which again is determined by higher demand. But they say it in plain sight if you could just look. Florida's economy is outpacing the U.S. with jobs, growth, and the supposedly inflation, meaning higher demand for people to come here. A lot of the inflation is because of things like the CARES Act and more money being printed in any time in any period in human history. Because Donnie, yes, Donnie, and Joey Basement have been printing money recklessly. And all of this increased money supply without any additional output, that's what causes inflation. Doesn't everybody remember getting free paychecks while the entire world was shut down and all of the progress and economic growth was forced to a halt? And then you just got a free paycheck for absolutely nothing? Where do you think that came from? That's inflation. When the entire world was shut down, and in the subsequent months and years since then, American citizens realized some really important things. Number one is that your leadership and your governor matter. So while other states and cities remain locked down for months and years, Florida opened even though people want to revise history and pretend that it didn't. So people moved to Florida because the economy was booming, it was open, the lockdowns and restrictions were limited here. Florida has persistent, nice and warm weather year-round, which reduces the need for home heating now that home heating oil prices have skyrocketed. And there's no state income tax, so you could save money simply by the nature of just moving here. So not locked down, no need to buy heating to warm your house in the winter, and less restrictive lockdowns, and also more parental rights for your children in school. Sounds like a diabolical combo. Put all that together with a booming economy and plenty of jobs, and it's an enticing place to move. That's why people moved here. That's why there's demand for housing. So all of these articles saying that Florida is an inflation hotspot, all they're saying is that there's an extremely high demand for housing in South Florida because people want to move here for all the previously stated reasons. As a result, I've never seen more construction in the South Florida area in the 13 years that I've lived here. Within 3 blocks of my house, there's 3 skyscrapers, hundreds and hundreds of units being built right now. Across the street from me and behind me, there are multifamily units being built also right now. There are construction projects everywhere, meaning that when they are done, the supply will be increased, which means that the prices can come down. This will happen over time. This is how an economy works. This is basic economics. This is economic growth. This is good. All the housing that has to be built to meet the sky-high demand means more people are working here, means more people are coming here to build, more supplies are coming here. Do people not understand this is how the economy actually works? Whatever. But people blame this inflation on DeSantis, like, oh yeah, it's DeSantis' fault. What, for creating an environment where the economy can flourish? Oh no, DeSantis! No, Rod! People are financially illiterate and clueless and willing to do gymnastics to prove their point, which is ridiculous to begin with on its face. Keep going, guys. You're really doing great. For people that don't understand basic economics, money, business, or how anything works. And they say it in the article, but if you change the meaning of the word inflation, it just makes it all make sense. You can see them referencing right here where they're talking about inflation via housing costs. Housing costs is measured in what's called the CPI, the Consumer Price Index. And without going too deep into the weeds about the cost of housing in the CPI, the cost of shelter, a lot of this shelter is based on prices that are set 6 to 12 months ago, right? When inflation was ripping. Rents and those things change over time, and inflation was really hot 5-6 months ago, and it still is. So a lot of these numbers and these prices are lagging indicators. But aside from that, the housing and shelter costs in the CPI is based on things like owner's equivalent rent, which is not even a real number, just an estimated number on what you might charge somebody to rent out your residence. It's not even based on an actual transaction. It's like measuring your temperature with a skewed thermometer. How accurate is it? But beside all that, it's important to understand that these articles, this information, these statements are being pushed through the mainstream media to people that are otherwise financially illiterate, or they're using this language that has been changed and modified in recent years to fit the message they're trying to push. How could you suddenly believe that something that CBS or CNN or MSNBC or any of these liars says is actually factual? People only use it when it's a weapon to wield against their opponent. People want to move to Florida because of the cost and freedom benefits, because of the governance benefits. The people are moving here, causing a demand in housing, which in and of itself is creating more jobs and feeding a flourishing economy. The flourishing economy and the people moving here for all of these reasons raises temporarily the cost of housing, shelter, rent, etc. Businesses come in and build new skyrises, new buildings, new housing, new multifamilies to service and meet this demand. The increased amount of supply brings the costs down. If another state was attracting as many people as Florida is, and people started moving away, for example, let's say they didn't like the governor, then all those people moving out of Florida to that other place would increase the supply because there'd be all these empty apartments. As a result, the price would go down. So Florida's hot because Florida's hot right now. The prices are up because people want to be here. So if you're going to blame that on DeSantis or suggest that this is some indicator of how he is bad at governance, you're not saying what you think you're saying. Because the inflation, even though people want to lay it squarely on Joey Basement, is largely present and the cause of none other than Donald J. Ballpark. Because people who are easily emotionally manipulated or financially illiterate or want anything as a rallying cry to support their guy and will do anything to push down their opponent, who right now is DeSantis for some reason, you're being led astray. What's new?